right, welcome everybody to this week's episode of Dig Deep. Another episode in English, in part due to the fact that we have our international guests here on the line. I have two guests with me, Senja and Alicia. And Senja, I'm going to start with you for a moment. You are developing a new online program in Mannheim in the context of data science. But last week you organized in Mannheim an event called Women in Data Science. Can you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about the event and what prompted you to do that?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thanks for your invitation. That's great to be in a podcast. My first podcast. So if I'm a bit nervous, then you know why. I'm a researcher at the University of Mannheim, and specifically I work for the project Ipsds, International Program in Survey and Data Science. And this is a project that was funded by the German Ministry of Education and Research with a purpose to establish an online-based master's in survey and data science. And what makes this project interesting is that we focus specifically on people who are already working or who would like to come back to work. And one of our target groups and priorities is to help women to succeed in their careers if they wish to balance their careers with raising their kids. Yeah, so that's why gender diversity is on the top. And when we have heard about WIDS, we thought it's a great opportunity for us to have such an event in Mannheim. So what is WIDS? I probably I'm talking a bit too much, so feel free to interrupt. And
yeah, let me interrupt with the question, and then I let you do the what is WIDS. So how can an event like Women in Data Science, this conference, help the women?
First of all, maybe a very short sentence on what WIDS is for those who don't know. WIDS is a conference that was initiated by the Stanford University in order to raise awareness of gender equality in the area of data science specifically. And what they do, they run a one-day conference where everybody's invited, men and women, but they feature only female speakers from various areas of academia and industry. And they also invite local partners to participate. That's how we basically joined the effort and organized a similar event in Mannheim. And when we were, going back to your question, when we were thinking about how we can actually create an event that could be helpful to women, we wanted to focus specifically on the aspects of networking and social support, and basically there are obviously a lot of different aspects how such an event can help, but we wanted to focus on this personal aspect to show women that they have a community and they can also support each other interchangeably.
It's funny that you mentioned sort of showing that there is a community. I was last night watching the live stream of South by Southwest, where a panel of women, among others Melinda Gates, made exactly that point, how important it is to just know that there is a community out there. Alicia, turning to you, you were invited as a speaker and participant in this WIDS event, and I'm curious to hear if that sense of community worked for you, if you experienced it that way. But before you answer that, why don't you introduce yourself briefly?
Great. Hello, and thanks for inviting me on the podcast. So maybe a few words about what I do. I'm currently working as a data scientist for a German cybersecurity firm here in Berlin. And as you said, Frauke, I was at the event last week as a speaker and participant. So going back to your question, I thought the event was really a success. I think given that it wasn't that large, it felt intimate, which I think made it easier to connect with the other women. And I've already, one of them sent me an email a couple of days ago and asked if I wanted to sort of continue staying in touch, and if she could like get back to me with more questions about my career. So I feel like that's already a big success, that clearly a connection was forged right there. And also for me, it was really interesting to be around women who work in similar fields or are thinking of going into those fields, but aren't necessarily like either in Berlin or specifically in the cybersecurity community. So like slightly outside of the group of people that I would normally meet at tech events.
Yeah. So maybe since not all of our listeners are in the cybersecurity community either, maybe you can say a few words about what it is that you do.
So I should probably say I've only been in my job for about 4 months. So I'm still finding my way. Right now, I'm working, I guess the main focus of my work is data analysis. I'm currently working on analyzing feeds. So these are feeds with data about threats on the internet. So for example, there might be some domains and URLs provided within these feeds that point to malicious activities on the internet. So I'm currently analyzing these feeds and trying to get an idea of what is useful for us as a company. Obviously, cybersecurity is a very large field, and we only focus on one specific part of it, and that's specifically economic cyber espionage. So we're interested in criminal groups or foreign governments that are spying on German companies. So we have, so that's why I'm keeping in mind as I'm analyzing these various data sources. Yeah. And
what, to the extent that you can speak about that, what would be feeds in this context? What do you have to imagine here?
It's not that easy to explain. It could be a variety of things. So it could be, for example, a text file that you receive every day with these are the most 1,000 most threatening domains on the internet right now. One thing I should say, I mean, I'm approaching this problem from the data science perspective, so I don't necessarily have all the context to understand what the feeds mean. I rely a lot on the metadata around the feeds to try and classify and organize and build relationships between, say, the various strings that are passed in these feeds, for example. Yeah.
Great. And so you said you've been in this job only for the last 4 months. What kind of positions had you had before you went into this particular one?
A variety. I guess, I mean, you can ask me more questions if you want more details. Broadly speaking, I mean, the fields I've worked in as a data scientist include fintech. So that was a micro lending company I worked for a few years ago. Then more recently, I worked for a company in the Internet of Things space. So that was working with a lot of data from machines. What else? I've also worked in travel. And before that, I was working in for a company interested in smart parking. So I guess my experience as a data scientist is quite broad, I would say.
And that's great, because that was one of the things I remember coming up at the Women in Data Science conference last week. And it's sort of what defines you as a data scientist. When do you have, quote unquote, the street creds to call yourself a data scientist and apply for such jobs? And obviously, Svenja, you are building a program that tries to teach those skills. So, Alicia, what would you say, differentiates you from others in the company? What is your different view on data or tasks that you usually tasked with?
Nowadays, people think of data scientists as a mixture of, so it's a little bit computer programmer, a little bit statistician, and a little bit machine learning expert. So I guess what differentiates me at the moment from other people in the company is I have a little bit, well, more than a little bit, but I have experience both on the math side. I studied maths. I've also done some programming, and I've been teaching myself machine learning through online courses. I guess the mix is probably what defines a data scientist, although I don't believe there's a strict definition of what it is.
Sonia, what was your impression talking to many of these different women last week, but also in creating this program? What do you think are sort of key skills and qualities people bring with usually, or have you seen in job postings in that field?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, especially because data science is emerging and still changing as a field. And I think what makes this field interesting is that there are, if we would list all the qualifications that people could bring in with them, that would be a very long list. And I mean, I think I saw somewhere a presentation that labeled it as a unicorn. You know, like sometimes people have an idea that if you want to be a great data scientist, then you have to do all those things perfectly. And, you know, that what you would call the unicorn, because it's practically impossible to be an expert in all those various aspects. But you can build your profile, you can identify your strengths and your interests, and you can definitely capitalize on your background. And I think that's what we also try to show with a range of our speakers, because we had people, for example, like Alicia with a math background, very strong coding skills. We had people with social science background who still went into the area of data science. And obviously, they also had to invest time in basically catching up with things that they didn't have in their background before, but they also could capitalize on some strengths that they brought from their social science background for their particular role.
One thing that became clear, I feel like, in the discussion was that it's not one particular language or one particular skill, but the skill to learn any of these pretty quickly. Right. And we had one very young participant from the social science for the or data science for the social good group. And she certainly was a good example for that. But she also mentioned Nerf guns, Alicia. I believe you jumped in and said that would be a red flag for you. Can you share with the audience a little bit what that discussion was about?
Yes. So I think somebody asked, or you asked, right? What kind of criteria or how do you evaluate tech companies or data science jobs? We were discussing the data science job market.
That's right.
Yeah. And yes, one of our fellow speakers said they have Nerf guns. I think it really, obviously it depends on very much on the person. I think Nerf guns to me says that the organization is young, probably male focused, and potentially a little bit immature, at least in its culture. I think at the beginning of your career, that might be okay. But at least now that I've worked for a few years, that's not something I look for. I think a grown-up environment, or at least an environment where whether you're young or a little bit older, it shouldn't really matter. I think it's about mutual respect and feeling comfortable at work.
And how would you get there? One of the points yesterday in the South by Southwest panel was exactly around this element. It's like, how do you have to structure your company so that it feels inclusive? In our case, and since it's just was the International Women's Day, inclusive for women, but of course you could make that argument broader and think of migrants or people of different color. Or religious groups. So what, in your experience, Alicia, having been at places that were quite homogenous and you coming in as a minority, would you have liked to see differently so that it would have been easier for you to feel comfortable or grow into the company?
I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is some sort of working group or platform where the minorities can voice their opinions and like come up and say, I don't think having Nerf guns as your welcome present is sending the right message, which was the case at that company. Yeah, I think it's really about going out and asking. So, I mean, you do have cases where there might not be minorities at the company in the beginning, so it's very hard to get their opinions if you don't have them there. But in that case, I would hope that you could bring someone in from outside to maybe have a look at your job descriptions, look at your office setup, and sort of give you some feedback on, do you think a woman or a migrant would be welcome in this environment?
So job description is something you mentioned. How would you... What should people look for in their job descriptions? I mean, often you see here that typical statement, if everything, all qualifications being equal, women are preferred or will be hired. But that's probably not what you have in mind. Is that right?
No, I'm sort of referring to like job descriptions where they might say or even job names where it says we're looking for a hacker. Like I think... that terminology can be quite off-putting for women who might not see themselves that way, but are potentially very good at programming. I guess it's about using language that is non-gender specific, or at least doesn't bring those images to mind when you see it.
Svenja, when reflecting on the event last week, was that the first time that you organized something specifically for women? And given what you learned, do you think that's a good thing to continue, or would you try to make this again more open and include more? What's your take in? What was the most important feature, I guess, of this event to carry forward, in your opinion?
It was indeed the first time that I have organized something like that. And in fact, it was the very first time I participated in such an event. I know that Alicia had more experience in that. And what I found very interesting is that I have enjoyed this event much more than I expected. And I can speak now for myself, but I have also heard feedback from other participants, especially younger participants, that this sense of community, this opportunity to have this personal exchange with other women, and we have of course also invited men because the aspect of gender equality affects everybody. But the fact that you can talk about that openly is very important, and it, I think, can affect your motivation. It can affect your development of your career choices very much. And I definitely would love to continue this and have such an event next year, and maybe have also smaller meetups. I know that there are many out there, but until now I didn't really have that on my radar, how important it can be. And of course, diversity is a big subject, and it's not only about gender, definitely. I was very happy to learn, for example, that in the US, they have now really big LGBT communities, community events also in the area of coding and data science. I think in Germany, it's not that big yet, this idea of diversity in the area of data science and community meetups. So I really hope to see more. But of course, because time is scarce, for now, I would like to focus on the aspect of women in data science. And but I would really love to participate in other events as well. So if somebody has something like that in mind, please let me know.
We'll definitely put your contact information in the show notes. Alicia, any final thoughts, sort of takeaways from you from the event that stuck with you that you want to share with the audience?
I found the event really inspiring, and I think, one of the things, which is probably a sign of a good event, is I felt like there was so much more we could have explored during either the little workshops we had. I got the impression that there was a certain thirst for asking questions and exchanging thoughts and opinions. I'd like to be involved in the next one, where it's kind of, I came home actually and I was like, I think I'd like to participate in more events, like maybe give a few more talks and just get out there a little bit more.
Great. Yeah, me too. I share both of your sentiment that this was sort of unexpectedly nice. I don't think that in the past I was particularly keen on sort of especially woman-oriented events. I always felt like, let's just make sure everyone comes to the things we do. But I have to say, I too thought the fact that were only female speakers on the podium and running these workshops did create a different atmosphere. And it was sort of, I became all of a sudden aware how rare that is, and how most of the time when I'm somewhere, it's all male and I don't even think about it. And so I would share your notion of being inspired. I do want to give a shout out to our colleagues in Frankfurt. Next week, Wednesday, there's a Women in Tech event in Frankfurt. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And I thank both of you, Alicia and Svenja, for joining us today and sharing a little bit the information. We will also post the videos that we screened from the sister event in Stanford, and hope that anyone who listened in from there had equally good experience as we had here. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.